We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks. Vicky Davis is here as well. It is the 15th of February, 2020, as we once again document the crisis of this once great republic, and we're now in decline, unfortunately, as we have the circus playing on around us every step of the way. This kangaroo court that was the impeachment fiasco, the kangaroo court that is the Roger Stone trial. Everywhere we see kangaroos. It is a total circus. We see circus clowns. We see circus freaks. It's just a show that isn't very entertaining, at least to me anyway. Really quite frightening to watch all this play out every single day. We're living history, ladies and gentlemen, but it's not something that's very fun to watch. Good morning, Vicky.
Good morning. That's a great description.
Yeah, well, as I look at things going on right now, and the Roger Stone situation, this guy did nothing wrong. He did absolutely nothing wrong. He's being railroaded into prison. And I'm not necessarily a Roger Stone fan, but I'm also a fan of justice. I'm a fan of giving people due process and not going after. You talk about going after someone's political enemies. Here you have a situation right now where Trump just got acquitted from an impeachment where they accused him of going after his political enemies. Now, I've got the Constitution right in front of me here, Article 2, Section 4, where, actually, let's back up, Section 3. He shall receive ambassadors, talking about the duties of the president. He shall receive ambassadors and other public ministers. He shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Now, does that not mean that you go after corruption? I mean, he shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed and shall commission all the officers of the United States. So, I mean, the constitutional duties of the president require him to pursue and go after corruption. Here you have an admitted case where Joe Biden stood up at the Council on Foreign Relations. Okay, he sat at the Council on Foreign Relations, and he admitted to doing the very thing that they accused Trump of doing. Why am I going back to the impeachment thing? Because the Democratic Party has operated as a mafia type of institution. You and I were talking before, Vicky, about how I said the Democratic Party is one of the most corrupt institutions on the planet. Yes, the Republicans are corrupt too, and I'm not disputing that. But the Democrats are far more corrupt. They don't stop their own candidates. I mean, they tried to stop Trump. They wanted to stop Trump, but they weren't able to because they don't have the abilities in place to do so. And yet you have the Iowa caucus where things were being rigged, and nothing seems to be being done about it.
I think a solution is coming. I really suspect that everything with our justice system has been a dialectic. Serious problems, one after another, all of it corrupt, all of it totally system of justice. So how does the U.S. Department of Justice flip and become the Department of Injustice? I believe it's dialectic, and I think the solution, we're going to hear the solution here pretty quick.
Well, you have Trump tweeting about the lack of justice in the Roger Stone thing. Here you have his own William Barr, his own Attorney General, comes out and criticizes him for expressing an opinion about it, saying, "Oh, I can't do my job with all these tweets." Well, you know what? Then it's time to resign, bucko. Because I sound like I'm a big Trump fan here again, but I can't help but defend the guy because other presidents will come in. This is a way of reining in the executive branch of the government. This is a way of the intelligence establishment who controls the Democratic Party, who is America's mafia. They are America's fourth silent, unelectable, unaccountable branch of government. It's the intelligence establishment. These people are the fourth hidden branch of government. Only they're not so hidden anymore. They're coming right out and doing everything they do right out in the open. Last week, this broadcast was censored by YouTube. Why was this broadcast censored by YouTube? Because we said the name Eric Ciaramella. We said the name Eric Ciaramella, the forbidden name, the name that you're not allowed to say anywhere. We put it in.
You mean Eric Ciaramella?
Yes, we put it in the description of the show. And I thought about it when I did that. I thought, we'll see what happens with this program, whether or not it's taken down off of YouTube. And you know what? It was. If you ever needed a clearer demonstration, if you ever needed proof that big tech is working hand in glove with the intelligence establishment, there you have it. I mean, they didn't exactly take it down. They marked it. They locked it in private mode so nobody could see it except us. And they very gracefully chose not to make a mark against our account. A strike. They call it strikes. Because 3 strikes and you're out.
Yeah.
So I don't know. The thing is, I'm still not going to self-censor. I may not send this one over to YouTube anyway. But this is where we're at today. I mean,
it's easy to understand why when you think about the history, the intelligence, the national security of which the intelligence agencies are part of, were established post-World War II. And immediately after World War II, they began, now we know this through declassified documents, they began to use the Marshall Plan to get cooperation to create the European Union. Mm-hmm. Through what they called trade agreements, but they really weren't about trade. They were about creating a harmonized body of law for cross-border trade, so that they didn't inhibit trade. Okay, as they got closer to the completion, the Maastricht Treaty, which was signed in, I think it was 1992, which was kind of like the final step, then they flipped around and started working on the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Yeah. To create a Soviet Union of North America.
Yeah.
That's what I'm calling it from now on. Soviet Union of North America.
I think that's a very accurate description of exactly what they're doing. You're absolutely right. We've talked about this before when the European, you talked about the Maastricht Treaty. The European Union, when it was created, it was Gorbachev who called the European Union the new European Soviet. Because he recognized that that's what the structure was. That's what the model was.
Yeah,
it's
regionalism.
Means
committee. So it's rule by committee.
Yeah, exactly.
A union
unelected
of
bureaucrats.
Committees. Yeah.
So, anyhow, if you can talk for just a minute here, elaborate a little bit. I had a problem just pop up, and I'm trying to take care of it.
One of those. What did it happen to occur when I was saying Soviet Union of the Americas?
No, I don't
North
know.
America?
I don't know exactly. It's nothing life-threatening. It just has to do with whether we can take calls or not.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, we want to be able to take calls. I like getting calls, but we don't get as many as we used to. But
well, a lot of times, to be honest, I don't solicit calls because we're normally just so packed with information here that it's one of those deals that maybe I'll handle this. I'll just handle this during the break. It'd be easier. So hold off on any calls, ladies and gentlemen, until the break, after the first break. Anyway, so I go to the Drudge Report this morning to find out what was going on, which a lot of times I don't go to the Drudge Report because I get tired of the Drudge Report, to be honest with you. It's establishment, too, by the way. But I see sources close to Bloomberg. Now, you just sent me that piece last night from, what was his name? I'm drawing a blank on his name.
I'm drawing
Steve
a blank on what I sent you.
Steve Bannon and Giuliani.
Oh, Bannon and...
Yes, Bannon and Giuliani were talking on... Because now Giuliani's got this show he does, which is kind of interesting, that he... carves out time. And frankly, I think the President of the United States should be doing this. He should be using technology today to get his message out. Not just Twitter. I know he uses... But why doesn't he do a... I understand he probably does the weekly radio address or the weekly whatever it is. He should be doing these fireside chats.
I'm not sure he could actually discuss policy. Trump seems to have... he's kind of like a one-note Johnny.
Yeah. He would have a hard time staying on point, I think is what you're saying.
Yeah. He has the stump speech down pat. That's easy. But actually talking about policy, I don't think he knows the policy well enough to really talk about it. He always has other people talk about the policy.
Well, maybe he should be scripting this out. I don't know, because the modern technology, being what it is, I think a whole lot of people would be able to spread this stuff around. I don't know. It was just a thought. But the point is that now Steve Bannon is saying that he thinks Michael Bloomberg has a chance. Now, I know that Pete Buttigieg, there's a lot of funding mechanisms supporting Pete Buttigieg. And there are a lot of people who are from the Hillary campaign that are involved in Pete Buttigieg's campaign. We know
his father was a Marxist. I wonder if his father was one of the so-called refugees that came in from the Soviet Union in the 1980s.
I can't speak to that, but I do know that with this app that was failing, that failed during the Iowa caucus, that it was very interesting to watch that whole fiasco playing out, because it proved to me, and I just kind of shrugged my shoulders, well, the Democrats are doing what the Democrats always do. They're rigging an election. They're rigging it against Bernie Sanders. Now, Bernie Sanders did very well in the primary in New Hampshire. But it's interesting how he was He was robbed. In my opinion, he was robbed of it in Iowa. We know Pete Buttigieg's people. Pete Buttigieg basically paid $40,000 for development fees to the company that runs that app. And then you've got that. You've got the Hillary for America people supporting him, and they're all in there. Now, in the meantime, you have this from the Drudge Report just this morning. Sources close to Bloomberg campaign tell Drudge Report that candidate is considering Hillary Clinton as a running mate after their polling found the Bloomberg-Clinton combination would be a formidable force. Drudge has learned that Bloomberg himself would go as far as to change his official residence from New York to homes he owns in Colorado or Florida, since the Electoral College makes it hard for the POTUS and VPOTUS, president and vice president, from the same state. Developing. So, in big giant red headlines, exclusive, Bloomberg considers Hillary running mate. So, my question is, who the hell would vote for either one of these characters? I
don't know. If Bloomberg does announce, then I will be working on bringing forward all the information that I have. I mean, he was meddling in my little town of Twin Falls on the refugees issue. He wanted to. He was behind the concept of making it a welcoming community.
Yeah. This guy has networking all over the place. Being the fact that he is, involved with that U.S Mayors.org. Bloomberg is bad news.
Right, and climate change. I mean, he's totally behind climate change. And changing our entire society and I believe our financial system,
gun control
for the green economy, the whole deal. I mean, Bloomberg is a total communist.
He's a complete snake. He's a complete snake, and he is. He wants to take away the guns, and he's got a lot of leverage and he's got a lot of money. I'm going to go ahead and play that. I took a clip from that interview between Giuliani and Steve Bannon. I think people need to listen to this because Steve Bannon, now, to be honest with you, I don't really care about either one of these people. I think Steve Bannon is a snake too, to be honest with you. And Giuliani definitely. But the point is that they're very smart politically, and when I saw this, I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. I couldn't imagine Bloomberg being the Democratic nominee, but he makes the case that if he's not the nominee, he could very well be the overlord of the nominee simply because he's got billions and billions of dollars. Anyway, here's Giuliani and Steve Bannon talking about this.
I think it's down to four Democratic candidates. What about you?
It's down to one candidate. It's Bloomberg versus Trump. You're going to be in the middle of this. Bloomberg will either himself be candidate, or he'll be the overlord. Tell me what that means. He's doing a leverage buyout of the Democratic Party. He's going to put $2 to $5 billion in 8 months. Rudy, you've had to go around and shake the hands to raise that kind of money. Sheldon Adelson commits $100 million.
It's nothing.
It's nothing. The most has ever been committed to a presidential election, I think, by an individual. It gets an asterisk in Politico. Here's my point. Quantity has a quality all its own. This is very dangerous. Because of Barack Obama's financial policies in the bail and what happened in flooding the zone with liquidity at the Federal Reserve after the financial crisis of 2008 made Michael Bloomberg and others oligarchs. We've had wealthy people in this country forever. Right. We've had the golden age. And you've been mayor of New York City. You've had to deal with billionaires and multi-billionaires.
Absolutely.
This is something different.
Yep.
Michael Bloomberg is an oligarch. Like an oligarch, he's there. He's a moderate to slightly liberal Republican mayor of New York City. Okay? He is doing not a hostile takeover. He's doing a leverage buyout of the Democratic Party. He will either be the candidate, or in all likelihood, I think, because of his lack of interpersonal skills, maybe not be the candidate, but he will have a candidate. One of those will be an issue. He already said with Bernie, he'll take Bernie if he has to. I happen to believe, and I've said this, that Hillary Clinton will ride in after he drops a $250 million bomb on Super Tuesday. Remember, as of today, he's going to get close to $400 million already. He spent $100 million just over the impeachment process.
Is the money going to register in those primaries? Is money the way to get elected?
It's just not money. He has a organization. He's had a massive
field team. He had that when he was mayor, too.
And he knows ground game. He's very smart. He's got every town USA. He's been his gun.
Remember, no question he's very smart.
Remember, people have to remember something. Donald Trump is impeached because of Michael Bloomberg. Michael Bloomberg put up the $100 million that backed those House candidates. He takes ad out now on CNN that says, I picked 23 House seats, I won 21. Okay? It's Michael Bloomberg who literally took apart one of the most important institutions we have on the right, the NRA. It was Michael Bloomberg, Everytown USA going after him, but also backing these attorney generals like Letitia James and others that she may bring criminal charges against the NRA.
Who announced while she was campaigning that she wants to bring criminal charges against the president.
He's backed these radical attorney generals across the country, not just here.
Right.
So he's gone after that. It's Bloomberg's organization. Remember, his data operation, the president with Brad Parscale is the most sophisticated in political history. Bloomberg united the capital markets of the world with data. This is a guy, his data operation may be even more sophisticated than the president's. And you're talking about amount of capital. This is not donation cash. This is not, $100 million is a rich guy writing a check for donations. This is applying $2 billion. Remember, right now he spent $100 million on negative ads just on the president on impeachment. So we're in a dangerous, dangerous time in American politics. We've never had a situation where one individual, it's getting to be like Eastern Europe in these countries like Russia, where now we have an oligarch who will decide in the hatred of Trump on the left. Right, not so much from some of the Bernie people, but the populists, but the hatred of Trump on the. We've seen every exit poll that said by 2 orders of magnitude, they don't care what the ideology is, they don't care if the candidate agrees with them on policy. They want somebody that can beat Trump. Bloomberg's going to offer an opportunity to say, it's not me, it's my money, and it'll be.
So you would say 50% chance is Bloomberg, 50% chance he gets to pick.
I think it's 50% chance he's actually the nominee, but it's 100% chance that his capital, it'll be president. You're going to have a populist nationalist in Donald Trump, a fire-breathing populist versus a globalist, and somebody that's got billions of dollars. And the Democratic Party, which I came from a family of Democrats, to me is going to have to do a gut check. They're going to have to really think about who they are as a party, who they are as people, to allow an oligarch to come in here and to try to not just buy an American election, but to try to change the arc of the country. And I believe the salvation of Donald Trump in this campaign, because I tell folks, if you think 16 and you and I knew how nasty it was, you ain't seen nothing yet. This is going to be all about mobilization. This is all about getting people out. I happen to believe that Bernie will not be the nominee, that they'll have somebody else, and I think that the 10 or 15 or 20% of the Bernie followers who are populist, who see in President Trump, they don't like everything about President Trump, some of his policies, but they see that he gives voice to working class people. It's those people either staying home or coming to support President Trump that could be the key to victory in 2020.
And I agree with him on the Bernie part. It's clear they don't want Bernie, and they're going to stop him by hook or by crook anyway. But
yeah, you know what? That's very interesting about Bloomberg being the one to connect up the global markets. He's arrogant enough, and I think probably New York enough to have not understood how our election system works nationwide. It makes me wonder if he was behind the idea of a nationalized voter registration database.
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah, because that's one thing that always bothered me. That was the first story that I wrote about the election hacking, because it started out, with somebody supposedly the Russians trying to hack the websites of the state secretaries of state.
Right. Which it was the Homeland Security Department.
Right, which brought home scam security into it. And Jay Johnson then declared the election infrastructure as critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
Which is basically a federal takeover.
Yeah, exactly. Setting the stage for federalization of our state elections. And a lot of people wouldn't understand, because they don't understand federalism, and they don't understand the important concept of the states having their own sovereignty. The elections and the way the states do their elections should be under state control, because it's the states that, our country was set up not as one country. Our country was set up as 50 separate, countries. And
essentially, and they all have their own constitutions.
Yes. And that's the way it should be. But the federal government has been trying to overrun state power and take everything over to the point where the states have no sovereignty anymore. And to be fair, there's a fair number of state legislators and governors and what have you that have acquiesced to federal authority. Their solution to everything is not to stand up against the federal government in reality and just say we're not going to do what you say because we don't have to. No, they go and sue them in federal court. So how is that going to do anything? That's what drives me nuts.
It shouldn't even be the federal court, because the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction in disputes between the federal government and the states.
Well, anytime the states go up against the federal government, in federal court, you're playing in their domain, people. That's the whole problem.
That's what I mean. They don't belong in federal court. They belong in the Supreme Court.
Well, they don't belong there at all anyway, because they don't. They just say, you know what, to hell with you. To hell with you.
If the feds try to impose something, the states have to fight back. You cannot ignore
You're going to lose every time in federal court. Fighting back
That's what I'm saying. They should never, never, never bring something into federal court. It's the Supreme Court that is the court of original jurisdiction.
We got the break. Stay
in
with
disputes.
us.
But okay.
Where the spooks go to find out what's really going on. This is Govern America.
And we're back. This is Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks. Vicky Davis is here as well. GovernAmerica.com is the website for the show. GovernAmerica.com. You can get archived copies of the show. You can get live streams. You can get a lot of news information from various sources on the main page there. GovernAmerica.com. And also Vicky Davis has her information as well. Go ahead and give your information out, Vicky. You're muted.
My website is thetechnocratictyranny.com, and I have an older website called channelingreality.com, and both websites have they're cross-linked, and my email address is on both of them.
Yeah, very good. All right, so before the break, we were having a spirited debate before, kind of a deliberation. Yeah, go ahead.
I was thinking that maybe the reason they do bring things into federal court, is because they've already signed their rights away, in these programs where the feds are funding some aspect of it. That may be why they do that, because they've already given away their sovereign rights when they accepted the money.
Yeah, and you may very well be right, and that's a different issue. What we're talking about here is the fact that the states have given up basically acquiesced their authority to the federal government, their sovereignty. And this is a big problem. The reason why we have states, the reason why this system was set up in the first place is if you don't like the government, if you don't like the laws, if the laws become too oppressive to you in one place, you can move to another place. And yeah, that's pretty drastic, having to move. But at least it's better. At least you can afford to do. It's possible that you can do it, and you can live free. Most of us can't afford to move because we have jobs or something that tie us to a specific geographic location or whatever. But if it gets bad enough, if it gets oppressive enough, you could find another job. You could just do something else. It's a way out. It's an escape from tyranny. I mean, imagine living in Illinois where all of the insane stuff is going on there. I think Illinois is one of the most oppressive states in the Union.
Pennsylvania actually is a very oppressive state also.
Well, California. I mean, we could do, I mean, if we want to name, in New Jersey, I can think of things about New Jersey. I wouldn't want to live there either. The point is, though, is that the beauty of it is you can pick from 50 different states if you live in the United States and decide which one it works best for you because the laws are different. And this is the same argument. Well, I don't want to go down that bunny trail yet. I want to try to stay on topic here. The point is that with the system of federalism that we have, that is the beauty of it, is that you have 50 different sovereign entities, 50 different countries that you can choose from, and you can choose which one is least oppressive to you.
Can I just throw in a little correction to what you just said?
Sure.
You said has, and I would say had with a D. Had. The system we had.
Yeah, true. And they have been working to undermine that system for decades, my whole life. I know that, but part of the problem is that the states don't fight for their own sovereignty. And that's what we were talking about before the break, is this issue that the states go and sue in federal court, and how do you ever expect to win in a contest that's basically rigged? It's like Roger Stone. We'll come full circle back to that again. Here he is fighting against a jury that's biased. Well, at least the foreman of the jury is biased. The foreman of the jury got on social media and was tweeting out, basically this person is a never Trumper. She is a Democratic shill, apparently, from what we read. That's the impression we get. And
was she tweeting out? Did she tweet out after the case was over?
Let me. I'll just read you. Let's see. Here we see from Fox News. Former Memphis City Schools Board President Tamika Hart, that's her name, revealed Wednesday that she was the foreperson of the jury that convicted former Trump advisor Roger Stone on obstruction charges last year, and soon afterward, her history of Democratic activism and a string of her anti-Trump left-wing social media posts came to light. Hart even posted specifically about the Stone case before she was selected to sit on the jury, as she retweeted an argument mocking those who considered Stone's dramatic arrest in a pre-dawn raid by a federal tactical team to be excessive force.
Hold on then.
Yeah.
Then she was not qualified to be on that jury.
Yes.
Because she knew about the... see, that's what I mean. This has got to be a dialectic.
The whole thing is a kangaroo.
The whole damn thing has to be a dialectic.
That's why I said at the top of the show, we're seeing kangaroos everywhere. There's kangaroos everywhere. This whole thing is just a big giant... And this judge that oversees this case, Judge Amy Berman, she denied the defense request to strike the juror. And the way they word this here, it emerged that U.S. District Judge Amy Berman Jackson had denied a defense request to strike a potential juror who was Obama-era press official with admitted anti-Trump views and whose husband worked at the same Justice Department division that handled the probe leading to Stone's arrest. I mean, this whole thing is rigged. It's rigged against Roger Stone. They're railroading this man into prison, and it's not right.
Okay, I had questions about whether or not it was a dialectic, but now I'm absolutely positive.
Okay.
And this might be the point where we bring up the Merida Initiative.
Okay.
Because, and now keep in mind the timing of this, we have the U.S. MCA
I think I know what you're getting at. Mm-hmm. Because does it have something to do with in order to build new, we have to destroy old?
Yes, it does. That is the problem. And then the reaction, oh, we have such a corrupt system. And the solution ends up being a harmonization.
New system.
For the Soviet Union of
America.
North America.
That's right. Before we get to the new system, or their solution to the problem that they created, how about this? Breitbart, Swalwell, impeaching Trump over Roger Stone is not off the table. See, Trump is making comments on Twitter about how unjust this is with regard to Roger Stone. And it is unjust. But now they're talking about if he goes ahead and pardons Roger Stone, as he should, by the way, and as is his duty, and well, not only duty, but it's his right as president to be able to pardon people who are federally prosecuted that are under an unjust system. You know, he has every right to do this, and they're talking about going after him for it. So every single thing the president does is something that incites the mob, the mafia, after him. This is why, Vicky, you know, this goes right into your argument that this is a dialectic, because every single institution in the federal government right now, every single institution is a corrupt and thoroughly, you know, everything's not functioning. It's just not functioning anymore. It's falling apart.
Right. Which is you know what, I've been listening to videos about the history before the Berlin Wall fell, and I found one of Bill Bradley. He was a senator talking about the Soviet system, and how basically what he was saying was that Gorbachev was admitting their system just wasn't working. So the whole history that we thought we knew about, you know, the Berlin Wall coming down being a surprise, and then the reunification of Germany being a surprise, bull. It's all bull. They knew it ahead of time, and there was planning for it, and it's in what they were saying. But, you know, the media never picked it up and never broadcast it. But when you go back and listen to those old programs, they were saying it, basically. You know, they were already working with the Soviets.
Yeah. So you want to get to the Merida Initiative. So let's go ahead and do that. You found a hearing on the U.S. Mexico security cooperation. You know, the thing is, ladies and gentlemen, we had a situation a few years ago. It's been quite a few years ago now, where during the Bush administration, the George W. Bush administration, he was working with Vicente Fox in Mexico, and I can't remember, was it Calderon in Canada at the time? I'm trying to remember now.
I think, it was Calderon. No, he wasn't Canada. He was Mexico. Calderon.
Okay, no, then it wasn't. Who was the Prime Minister of Canada at the time? I don't remember now. Anyway,
I want to say Chrétien, but I'm not sure that's right.
It doesn't sound right, but anyway, the point is that George W. Bush was working. He set up the Independent Task Force on the future of North America, and they were talking. They introduced this idea that we were going to build, and the Council on Foreign Relations about that time too came out with building a North American community, and they were going to create this North American Union with a superhighway system. And they were going to have everything. Basically, we'll all just be one happy family here in North America with Canada, Mexico, the United States, and we're not going to focus.
The Security and Prosperity Partnership.
That's right, SPP, and there was a website attached to it and everything, and the people found out about it and screamed about it and yelled about it, and the idea supposedly was dropped. And I say supposedly because they never really drop any idea. This is a very
they just
important,
stopped talking about it.
The whole idea that they're going to drop any agenda that they ever put forward, especially when it's at the heart of globalism. They have to do this in order to achieve their one world government, new world order. And people, what's laughable, Vicky, is I challenge anybody to call us conspiracy theorists and tinfoil hat wearers when we have all of their words in the open of the show.
Right. Oh, yeah. We're well beyond that. When we first started talking about this, like the NAFTA superhighway and the pending what appeared to be the creation of a European Union-style governing authority over the United States, Mexico, and Canada. When we first started talking about that, people could say, oh, that's just a conspiracy theory. But we've just accumulated too much documentation. There's too much documentation now.
Yeah.
And it has been for quite a while. I think about 2010 is when they could no longer deny it. And they kind of had to say, well, yeah, it's just the economy, just a highway, just this, just that, diminishing what it actually was, which is the submersion of the sovereignty of the United States into a Soviet Union.
Yeah, and it worked so well for the people that had to live under Soviet rule, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, they're merging all systems to create a global system of governance. I mean, and that's the significance of Michael Bloomberg. If he did that, if he created the global marketplace for financial trading, then he's a danger. He's a dangerous person.
I'll tell you what, we have a call on the line, so we'll get to some of this audio here in just a minute. We have Jerry from Texas on the line, so let's go ahead and see if we can do that. Hello, Jerry, you're on the air.
Hey, good morning, folks. I may have a guinea or rooster crow here in a few minutes, but I'll try to keep it
That's
minimal.
okay. Listen, we love roosters.
Yeah.
Well, you can't have hens without roosters. So, but anyway, I've been having to listen to a lot of stuff from archives. Vicky, you're talking about this highway, the Trans-Texas corridor.
Mm-hmm.
Good old Whoopie, he's a wonder. But it kind of they're piecemealing it down. It's still going to happen. What, a mile wide? Something like half a mile wide.
Yeah, there's something like two or three football fields or something.
Yeah.
Or 6 football fields. It was very, very. It took a lot of real estate.
Okay. Mile square is 640 acres. That's a section. Okay, a section of land is 640. I don't mean to. Teach people that probably already know. You take a half an acre wide, 5,280 feet in a mile. Okay, half. You do the math. But if it's half a mile wide, 2 miles long, that's 640 acres, folks. You look at the length of Texas. That's a lot of acres.
Yeah,
it's taken out of production.
Mm-hmm.
But this I-35, which has been, back in Eisenhower days, it started. I can remember back in the early 60s, traveling part of I-35 through Austin and various places. They were talking about then it's connecting all the way from up in Canada through the United States, central part of the United States, through Mexico. It was going to go all the way to the tip of South America. This was back, I remember talking about that during the school. This has been in the works for, goodness, folks, 100 years.
Well, I think it's been in the works since at least post-World War II. I think they began planning the transportation system. It was Eisenhower's plan. He was a general.
Right.
And I think they began planning this probably even before World War II, but certainly after.
Well, Eisenhower was so impressed, as I understand it, of the autobahns that Hitler and the Germans built in Europe. Germany and what they had moved their various articles of weapons. Matter of fact, up around Dallas, Fort Worth, on I-20, I-40, and I guess probably I-35, it's been changed so much. There's overpasses that's got embossed in the side of those overpasses maybe 3 tanks, so many aircraft, or something that you could put under there as used as emergency bomb shelters. Believe it or not. Have y'all ever seen any of that?
Well, I grew up in the 60s. I grew up in the duck and cover era, so yeah, I'm familiar with the idea of bomb shelters. But it's not the highway per se that disturbs me. It's the merger of sovereignty. And
it's the destruction of sovereignty, Vicky. It's not the merger; it's the destruction.
Well, it is the destruction of our sovereignty, but they're merging sovereignty between the 3 countries to create a
sovereignty
a governing
over them.
Body over the top of us.
Yeah, the sovereignty is created over them.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I read a blurb this week that Germany's looking at a Dexit. Did you have you seen that?
No, I haven't, but I'm not surprised, actually.
And of course, Merkel is against it.
Of course.
But they're talking about it's a Dutch. That Dutch as I kept saying, how do they get a Dexit Germany? But it's the Dutch. I guess is how you pronounce that, exit. And there seems to be a pretty good movement on that. They want their sovereignty back. So,
well, I don't think that Britain really Brexited, to be honest with you. Time will tell, but I think what's going to happen is what we predicted on the show. Where they are officially out, but they're never really out. They're going to make negotiations and tie up loose ends, and by the time they're done tying up loose ends, they're going to be tied right back to the thing.
Well, I agree. Yeah, it's just
they're not going to let this happen. That's the whole point. So they'll go through the charade, and if they happen to not be able to rig the vote, they'll figure out a way to get them right back in. Because that's just the way it is. I mean, they've worked too hard for too many years to get this thing in place, Jerry, that they're not going to let it go.
Well, I agree. Here 3 or 4 weeks ago, I guess now, I said, I hope it happens, but I'm not holding my breath.
Right.
They're not going to let it happen. Well, it's happened in name only so far.
Yeah, exactly.
So they still got to, they got to do the root canals.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
It's going to be painful, every way you look at it. They made the first incision, maybe, as a good terminology. I don't know how to verbalize this, but I got in late on your show. You was talking about moving to different states and this sort of thing. Time I turn around, we've got 55 acres. We run a bunch of goats, way too many. We've got pot-bellied pigs at free range, our chickens, our turkeys, our guineas, and other animals. And every time we turn around, we're reading where they want to register this animal. They want if you've got more than 5 beehives on your place in Texas, you've got to register as a commercial beekeeper. And they walk in on you. Every time you turn around, they're chipping away.
Yeah.
A good example. I will give you an example of chipping. The notorious bank robber Sam Bass was killed and shot and died just outside of Round Rock back in the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
He's buried in a little cemetery there in western part of Round Rock. They put a granite tombstone up there, not real big, a head marker. And over the years, people went by to see this. This was a point of attraction for people from all over the country. And over the years, people's taken hammers and chipped off a little bit of that tombstone till there was practically nothing left, and they had to replace it with a new one. And that's the way that our freedoms and our independence in this country is going. They're chipping away. Schumer, I read where he wants now to where you've got to register all of your gun parts, not just the receiver now. He's got a bill that says it does not interfere with the Second Amendment. But if you buy a new barrel for a firearm, you're going to have to register it. So,
that's exactly how they're going to do it. And that's how, they can't just come right out and say you can't own a firearm anymore because of the Second Amendment and because of the backlash. So this constant chipping away is the way they get the job done until the point where eventually you won't have any rights. And they'll say, on paper you will, but in reality and in practice, you won't.
That's pretty much the way it is right now, actually, Darren. You're right about that.
It can get much worse, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
And property tax. I've mentioned this on the other show more than once. Ad valorem property tax. If you think you've got freedoms, if you can buy a piece of property and live on it, become self-sufficient, and just live what you can do on your land, no. There's certain restrictions. Like, again, here in Texas, we've got to have so many head of cattle or goats or some productive animal or plant a certain crop in order to get a tax break. And but on top of that, a property tax. You're not on your land.
It's just extortion. Hey, Jerry, I appreciate your call. Thank you so much. I'm up against a hard break here.
Y'all have a good weekend.
You too. God bless you, sir.
You too.
Yeah, thanks for calling in. And, folks, you're welcome to call in as well. 610-600-1776. That's 610-600-1776. Or toll free 844-6-GOVERN. 844-646-8376. We've got to take a quick time out here, and we'll talk about the Merida Agreement, the Merida Initiative, on the other side of the break. More North American Union stuff, ladies and gentlemen. You thought it was gone. You thought it was dead. Yeah, it never really dies. We'll be back.
Before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
The councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks. Vicky Davis is here as well. It continues to be the 15th of February, 2020. If you're listening at noon Eastern Time on the 15th of February, 2020, we are in fact live. If you're listening some other time, hey, it's not live. What can I say? Vicky Davis is here. I'm Darren Weeks, and we're talking about the North American Union. Throwback to some of the other stuff that was going on years ago. The Security and Prosperity Partnership was the official name for it. And they launched the Independent Task Force on the Future of North America. And this is all driven by the Council on Foreign Relations. And I think it's interesting, Vicky, that the Council on Foreign Relations was instrumental in the formation of the USMCA. Now, let's ponder this for a moment. This organization, this shadowy organization that grew out of, it's really an arm of the Royal Institute of International Affairs.
That's right.
And they were the ones back when Bush was in office, the second Bush, George W. Bush, who was pushing the North American Union. They were the ones that were that had put out this independent task force on the future of North America. This report.
Well, let's back up for a second. It was actually Ronald Reagan who proposed the idea of free trade from Tierra del Fuego, Argentina, to the Arctic. So
okay.
And of course, Ronald Reagan was very close with Margaret Thatcher.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing that's funny about it, is everybody just practically worships the ground Ronald Reagan walked on, and he was such a traitor. He was such a traitor to this country.
Well, you know what? That's one of the things that really opened my eye. I voted twice for Reagan. I thought he was a great president. But as I began doing this research, I found this thing that he did, and then that thing that he did, and another thing that he did. He really sold this country out big time.
Yeah, and he probably burns in hell to this day now as a result of that.
I think he was a communist all along.
Well, he was known in Hollywood.
He was an actor, he was playing the part of the, grandfatherly old Republican.
Who is the guy that did the Red Stars over Hollywood? I'm blanking. Chat room, help me out here. Red Stars over Hollywood. I could probably find it here pretty quick, but he basically said that he said that it was Myron Fagan. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It was Myron Fagan who did Red Stars over Hollywood, and he did another one, too. We run them on the stream. I was just blanking on his name. The point is that Myron Fagan said that Ronald Reagan was known as Red Ronnie in Hollywood. He was known as Red Ronnie.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do we make of this? And the thing is he masquerades. He masqueraded as a huge, giant conservative who was all for freedom and the shining light on the hill, or however he put it. And yet it was all just speech writing.
That's how they do. They adopt the language that they know we want to hear. I mean, as I understand it, it's the classic psychological manipulation that they blame on the Soviets. The human relations and all of that stuff. But dang, I think it's been more applied on the Soviet Union.
Yeah, more applied here in the United States.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got this new modern push, basically, and nobody seems to know about this. Nobody knows about it. It's going on behind the scenes, and we come back to this hearing on the U.S. Mexico security cooperation. Now, this was just a recent hearing, wasn't it, Vicky?
Yes, it was just last week.
It's fresh. So this isn't something we're talking about that happened years ago. This is going on right now. The hearing on the U.S. Mexico security cooperation. Here's opening remarks by Representative Albio Sires. He's a Democrat from New Jersey.
Mexico's homicide rate has reached its highest level in decades. Targeted attacks against journalists, human rights defenders, and local public officials have continued at rates higher than almost anywhere in the world. A recent report from the International Federation for Journalists found that Mexico is the deadliest country in the world for journalists. Of the 49 journalists killing it documented in 2019, 10 were in Mexico. Most journalist murders, like most homicides in Mexico, are never solved. I have long advocated for robust U.S. assistance to help Mexico strengthen its democratic institution, combat corruption, defend human rights, and improve security. I believe that Mexico and the United States have a shared responsibility to reduce violent crimes and improve quality of life for those living on both sides of our border.
So there you go. Shared responsibility? I mean, that's the question I have. What is this business about shared responsibility? Why would it be our responsibility to share in policing them?
But
this is
and for decades and decades they've said, well, if there wasn't a market in the United States, then the drugs wouldn't cross the border. But that's baloney, you know. There wouldn't be a market. I mean, drug addicts wouldn't have access to the drugs if they didn't cross the border. So it just depends on which side you'd like to emphasize.
It's the chicken and the egg, and they'll emphasize
blame the victims. You know.
It's a classic example of chicken and egg, and they'll use whichever side of it benefits them the most.
Did you notice that guy has a very heavy Mexican accent?
Yes, I did, and that's interesting how he's a Congress critter and he's pushing for all of this. Anyway,
from New Jersey, by the way. Yeah. And when I lived back east, there really weren't that many Mexicans in New Jersey. I didn't see very many Mexicans. There are a lot of Puerto Ricans, but not Mexicans.
Well, it's interesting because he sounds a lot like that Vicente Fox. Mm-hmm. I could find. Well, anyway, I won't get distracted with that. Anyway, but he's talking about shared responsibility, ladies and gentlemen.
The United States must enact stricter gun laws. Dedicate more resources to combating money laundering by the cartels and increase investment in programs to reduce domestic demand for illegal drugs. But we also expect a sincere commitment on the Mexican side to reducing this violence. I appreciate the efforts that Mexico's security forces are making, but they are being outgunned by these brazen and well-resourced cartels. A Mexican civil society organization called Common Cause released a report this week showing that 953 police officers have been murdered in Mexico in just the past 2 years. I admire those courageous individuals who are putting their lives on the line, but it is clear that substantial political commitment is needed to address the underlying problem of impunity and corruption which are perpetuating the violence in Mexico. Now is the time for the U.S. government to look critically at our assistance programs to determine what is working and what is not. I am eager to hear from the State Department and USAID about our strategy and how Congress can measure tangible progress under the Merida Initiative. I sincerely hope that the Trump administration is prioritizing security in our engagement with Mexico rather than pressuring Mexico to use the National Guard to prevent desperate people from migrating. I know that many of my colleagues share my frustration that we have not made more progress under the Merida Initiative. I hope that this hearing will help us develop a clearer sense of what's next what next step we should take. I look forward to working with my colleagues and with the executive branch on a bipartisan basis to explore solutions to these difficult challenges.
It's interesting that he talks about how the Trump administration shouldn't be pressuring Mexico to not allow desperate people to come into the United States. Who is this guy representing? That's the question.
Exactly.
He's supposed to you said he's from New Jersey? Why should he be representing the caravans that come here from other places then? And that's the problem with all of these characters.
And why is it the problem of the United States? Mexico has a military.
Yes,
Mexico
let them resettle there.
What I think is a federal police force, just like our FBI or U.S. Marshals and so forth. So why is it our problem, the problems that Mexico is having?
Well,
they're trying to make their problems our problem.
Well, why is refugee resettlement the responsibility of the United States rather than, say, Mexico? If somebody from Latin America has a problem, why can't Mexico take them in? Why do they have to come further north? I mean, this is so blatantly transparent what's going on here. They're using these people as weapons to destroy our country. They're using these people
as a weapons system.
Absolutely.
That's exactly how I wrote about it, is that they're using refugees as a cultural weapon.
They are taking our country down. They're destroying everything because this is a calculated effort, ladies and gentlemen. This is calculated. People that come here, and I've got nothing against Latin American people. It has nothing to do with that. But if they don't go through the proper channels to properly learn about the country, to learn the language, to assimilate, to force them to assimilate, then they're going to bring their baggage with them. They're going to bring everything about their... and it's very obvious what's going on in various places where it's been overrun by refugees and asylum seekers, or whatever you want to call them, foreigners who are being brought in, allowed to come in. I mean, the whole place looks like a big garbage dumpster.
Yeah, well, California's been taken over. It's not. I don't think that they're actually part of the United States anymore. I think they are part of the that region in Mexico. In combination with Mexico.
Yeah, so anyway, Representative Francis Rooney, he's a Republican from Florida. He's also pushing gun control. He's also a dirtbag.
We must also acknowledge the flow of illegal weapons from the United States to Mexico, especially assault weapons and high-powered weapons, which contribute materially to the violence, along with the systemic corruption, impunity, and lack of rule of law. Since 2007, under the Merida Initiative, the United States has provided roughly $3 billion in security assistance to Mexico. Mexico, of course, has also contributed much more. From 2014 to 2018, U.S. security assistance has focused on the rule of law, anti-corruption, and human rights in Mexico. The Trump administration has added focus on attacking the financing of the cartels and combating the increased trade in opioids and synthetic drugs, which I think is a positive step. Yet the United States and Mexico must continue to work together to improve existing security infrastructure and ensure that regional security priorities are addressed. It's also critical that the Mexican government communicate to us what they are doing to address the problem and present a comprehensive security strategy that U.S. assistance can support. For its part, the United States should explore ways to modernize the security assistance provided under Merida. And we need continued intelligence sharing, capacity building, and the provision of technology and equipment.
Okay, I wanted to just kind of share a little bit from the Merida Initiative, Vicky, because most people have never heard of it. And it's not getting any airplay as far as I know. Have you heard it mentioned on any of the big news broadcasts?
No, I just happened to catch a snippet of it as I was walking by my TV, and your
TV
I heard a
was
woman say
it was on C-SPAN.
Say USAID working in Mexico in the justice system.
Yeah, which will get your attention if you know what to look for. From the U.S. Embassy website in Mexico, in December 2008, Mexico and the United States signed the first letter of agreement, or LOA, for the Merida Initiative, opening a chapter of historic cooperation and acknowledging the shared responsibilities of the United States and Mexico to counter drug-fueled violence threatening citizens on both sides of the border. Through 6 years of implementation, the Merida Initiative has led to a new architecture for bilateral security cooperation, provided tangible support to Mexico's security and judicial institutions, and helped to galvanize U.S. efforts to stop the flow of weapons, money, and the demand for drugs. Initially signed by Presidents Calderon and Bush. Now, what were we talking about earlier? Weren't we talking about Calderon and Bush?
Yeah, the Security and Prosperity Partnership. Well,
everybody thought that was dead.
Prosperity that was published by the White House in 2002, it noted that there was a meeting in Merida in 2002 for the Partnership for Prosperity. So they've been working on this for a long time.
Yeah, and everybody thought it was dead. Everybody thought it went away, and here it is. It just continues. Initially signed by Presidents Calderon and Bush, the Merida Initiative continues under Presidents Peña Nieto and Obama at the time. With $2.3 billion in appropriated funds from the U.S. Congress, the Merida Initiative has delivered over $1.6 billion in equipment and training to date. The strategic framework for implementing the myriad of the Merida Initiative activities and programs is referred to as the 4 pillars, each of which pulls together Merida Initiative programs under strategic objectives. Taken together, these 4 objectives will strengthen both of our societies in the fight against organized crime and violence, and will help drive the transformation of our bilateral security relationship.
Yeah, let's just cut right to the chase. What the whole thing is about is networked computer systems linking the agencies of governments into a governing system linked by technology. That's what all this is about. And so, we're supposed to believe that suddenly, after years and years of being competent at guarding our border, the Border Patrol suddenly gets incompetent. Drugs are flowing across, quote, refugees are flowing across, and oh my goodness, we're virtually helpless to do anything. We've got to cooperate with our neighbors. Well, the cooperation is technology.
Wasn't it interesting how we have a president right now that campaigned on building a wall, to keep the rabble out? Mm-hmm. Just the other day I was reading part of this wall that they put up actually blew over. The wind blew it over. Now, here's the height of American ingenuity, Vicky, and they can't put up a wall that doesn't blow over in the winds. I mean, are they really working to do this, or is this whole thing just a big show?
Well, when our country was being invaded around 2004, 2005, there was massive migration crossing the border, so much so that American men came together as Minutemen to protect our borders because the Border Patrol wasn't doing the job. There was a lot of discussion of it back then. And the thing is that American businesses could just hire illegals. All the illegal had to do was get across the border, and they could be hired.
Yeah.
And it's kind of stupid when you set up an incentive like that. All they had to do was tell American employers, if we catch you hiring an illegal alien, you're going to jail.
Yeah.
But, they...
But now they give them driver's licenses and let them vote in our elections.
Right. Which the story of that is that they are merging our country with Mexico and Canada, and that's the deal. They are eliminating the sovereignty of the United States as an independent nation.
Yeah.
Union.
They have this these 4 pillars, and I'll just quickly go over them. Disrupt capacity of organized crime to operate. Pillar 2 is institutionalize capacity to sustain the rule of law. Pillar 3 is create a 21st century border structure. Now, isn't that interesting? Under that pillar, they create a 21st century border structure. They say facilitate legitimate commerce and movement of people while curtailing the illicit flow of drugs, people, arms, and cash.
That's the smart border, by the way. Smart technology. Supposedly, the Trusted Shipper program, all of the highway systems, highway and commerce systems that end up being installed in a port location. That's what border infrastructure is. It eliminates borders and it creates a global networked system for commerce.
They say the Merida Initiative will provide the foundation for better infrastructure and technology to strengthen and modernize border security, and it, puts in context exactly what you were just describing. Modernize border security at northern and southern land crossings, ports, and airports. Professionalization programs will transfer new skills to the agencies managing the border, and additional non-intrusive technologies will there's the technocratic stuff. Non-intrusive technologies will assist in the detection of criminal activities. So think, facial recognition scanning, scanning of vehicles, and
surveillance cameras everywhere.
Yes, everything. It's a complete and absolute surveillance grid.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, Pillar 4, they say build strong and resilient communities. Strengthen communities by creating a culture of lawfulness and undercutting the lure and power of the drug trafficking organizations by implementing job creation programs, engaging. You remember Marie Harf, the former State Department spokesperson, coming out and saying, we need jobs for jihadis?
Yeah, all you need to do, stop terrorism is just to give them jobs.
Yeah, they're bored. They got nothing better to do. So, that's why they blow things up. So,
Yeah, and gang members are going to give up their hundreds and hundreds of, maybe millions of dollars for a job in a Amazon warehouse.
There you go. Yeah. You got a problem with that? By implementing, it would give them access to packaging and stuff where maybe they could ship things better. By implementing job creation programs, engaging youth in their communities, expanding social safety nets, and building community confidence in public institutions, Merida Initiative assistance will test new initiatives to strengthen Mexican communities against organized crime. Now, what's amazing to me about all this, Vicky, is as we're having this conversation, as we're talking about the Merida Initiative and the desire to strengthen Mexican communities against organized crime, I'm conscious of the fact that our military is gone out of this country, spread out all over the world in 190 countries or something? I mean, some 180. I mean, who can keep track?
We've been in Afghanistan for 17 years now, and they have 5,000 or something like that trained in professional police. I mean, it's just
yeah, and Trump says in his State of the Union address that he's going to end the wars and bring the troops home. Yeah, you've been there for at least 3.5 years, and you haven't brought any troops home. So you're never going to bring troops home. I'm sorry.
No, they're not.
We're not believing
You know what the our troops in Afghanistan does? Serves as kind of an extortion racket, because we have to keep paying, and they keep building and rebuilding in Afghanistan. I think it's an extortion racket, and I always did. From the first debate that I heard on military spending, it sounded to me like it was extortion. Your soldiers' lives or the money, one or the other.
Well, I can tell you the whole thing is it's a big ability to waste money, like unbelievable amounts of money. They go and we've talked on this show years ago. In fact, there's a YouTube video of me saying it on RBN back when we were on RBN about how they were actually paying, I think it was the Taliban, not to blow up bridges. They wanted to be able to get the bridge built, and so they would pay them to not blow it up, and then after we blow it up, or after we build it, then you can blow it up. You know, and I mean, this is how they operate over there. And I think it was that Global Post article that spelled all that out. I mean, this is how these deals work. I mean, they're dealing with these very people that we're supposed to be fighting. And the whole thing, you know, the American people have no idea where their money's going. There's no way to know. But we know it's being stolen. Everything's being sifted off the top. I got more audio from this hearing, and we're talking about the Merida Initiative, which is really the process of building the North American Union. Everyone thought they were rid of it under Bush, and I wonder how many other talk shows are talking about this. I'll bet zero.
Yeah, not many.
I guarantee you it's zero. We are the only place that you can get this sort of information. Stay with us. This is Govern America. Vicky Davis. I'm Darren Weeks. We'll be back in a moment.
Where the spooks go to find out what's really going on. This is Govern America.
All right, we're back. This is Govern America, talking about the Merida Initiative. Vicky Davis is here. I'm Darren Weeks. As we continue on here, getting back into the show here, we were discussing the North American community, the North American Union, and the Merida Initiative is a step in that direction, we assert. And we were sharing earlier from a meeting. In this meeting, again, was the U.S. Mexico Security Cooperation. It was in Congress and in the House of Representatives just this past week. And let me find where I was here. Hugo Rodriguez, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs. This is the State Department. He's talking about bilateral working groups that have been set up. Now, folks, I want you to really listen to this, because this shows you there are a number of bilateral working groups that are actively working on this project. There are a lot of personnel that are actively working on this project. And this guy's going to talk about that.
To advance efforts to combat our shared security challenges, the United States and Mexico have developed a new bilateral structure, the Mexico City-based High-Level Security Working Group.
A new bilateral structure.
Uh-huh.
What does that sound like to you?
Merger.
Does that sound like conspiracy theory? No, these are the officials. This is why we do this, and this is why you need to tell people about this broadcast. Because we come here every week and we share documentation from the actual sources that are implementing the conspiracy. And it is a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy fact, not a conspiracy theory. Here you're hearing Hugo Rodriguez, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs, talking about how they have bilateral working groups and how they're implementing a new structure. All right, let's continue.
The Mexico City-based High-Level Security Working Group. Under the umbrella of the HLSWG, we have jointly developed bilateral working groups to tackle issues of the highest importance. These working groups focus on drug policy, migration, illicit finance, cybersecurity, armed forces, emergency response, justice sector, and arms trafficking. Through these groups, we are identifying priorities and specific actions we can take together to make progress in each area. For example, we're looking at ways we can increase joint efforts to combat synthetic drugs and illicit drug production, increase drug interdictions and TCO prosecutions, and stem illicit finances. We are also working to reduce the number of illicit firearms, weapons, and the quantity of ammunition crossing the U.S. Mexico border. The continued threat posed by transnational criminal organizations to both Mexico and the United States requires our continual support. Bilateral cooperation must continue, and the Merida Initiative provides a comprehensive, flexible framework through which our partnership can move forward to the benefit of both Americans and Mexicans.
Okay, so I don't know if you have any comment on that, but...
Well, I would just like to say, whenever you have lawyers working on something that is should actually require good guys with guns and serious action, you know you're in trouble.
Yeah, no question about that. And again, I come back to why, if this is such a problem, why is our military gone? The very people who are in charge of defending the United States are gone into the Middle East. They're gone into various countries around the world, but they're certainly not here. These are the people that should be on the border. These are the people that should be defending us.
That's right.
So if they were really serious about the problem, that's what would be happening. But no, they're not serious, because this whole thing is being used as an excuse. It's a ruse to do exactly what they're doing here. Have an excuse to work on bilateral things, bilateral projects. Now, Barbara finds... Go ahead. You were going to say something?
I was going to say, did you hear the part where the woman from USAID was talking about implementing cognitive behavioral therapy for the wayward youth?
I got all the highlights.
Read gang members.
Yeah, social
drug
work.
dealers.
Yeah, social work programs. Yeah, we'll get to that. Barbara Feinstein is the woman you're talking about. Now, not to be confused with Senator Dianne Feinstein. Different woman. This woman, this Barbara Feinstein, is a deputy assistant she's deputy assistant for U.S. Aid Administrator for Latin America and the Caribbean. She's talking about the transformation of the Mexican legal system. Now, folks, again, what we're talking about here is merging our systems of government together. When you have different systems, when you have different pieces, think of a puzzle, okay? The puzzle has different shapes, and the shapes don't fit together. So if you want to fit the shapes together, what do? You have to modify the pieces, do you not? It's very clear what's going on here. So they're talking about in this...
Implementing community policing is what they're doing. And I think that's where we find the definition of community. They're talking about the North American community.
And they're talking about completely overhauling the so-called justice system in Mexico, changing the model of the presumption of guilt, which I didn't know Mexico had the presumption of guilt. When you were accused, you're presumed guilty, evidently. And
I didn't know that either.
That's really quite frightening, actually. Because
it sounds like they implemented that in our country, so maybe they got their wires crossed. Which system are they implementing where?
Exactly. Well, yeah, and that's a good point, because, in this day and age, it's not supposed to be the way it is, but you are presumed guilty, and then you have to prove your innocence. But the way the system was set up is that you were presumed innocent until proven guilty. And that is exactly what they say they're transforming Mexico into, from the presumed guilty to presumed innocence. And again, I say this is the reason. The reason is because the systems have to be identical, and when they're identical, they're very easily to be merged.
At the beginning of the Merida Initiative, as we've talked about, Mexico has embarked on this seismic shift to transform their judicial system from one with a presumption of guilt to a presumption of innocence. And so while all of that has been on paper, and USAID has worked very hard with the Mexican government very much in the lead to try to ensure that implementing legislation has been in place in each of the states to carry out that reform, that is obviously the easiest part, because now you have the laws on the books. But in terms of the cultural change that is actually required to get all the individual actors in that system, including those who had been part of the old system, to go from a system where your judge is the same as your prosecutor to a system where, in fact, you have to go and make the tough decisions about which cases you're actually going to prioritize, and then build those cases, work on forensics, as my colleague mentioned, and try to build the strongest evidence that you can to achieve those convictions. The issue as we see it is a structural and a systemic one. It's not necessarily the judicial reforms that are needed at this point. Obviously, there could be some tweaks here and there, but it's reform of a system which requires actually working with the actors that are in that system to work together. So in terms of the evolution of our approach and what we have done differently in the rule of law space, whereas in the beginning, as I said, our work was mostly focused on helping at the state level to ensure the implementing legislation was in place, the next phase for us was classroom training for all of the individuals. So that's judges, defense attorneys, prosecutors, investigators, etc. And we've realized that classroom training, while helpful, was not enough. What we needed to do was actually accompany, provide targeted assistance to actually bring these actors together.
This is just mind-boggling to me. We're training Mexico how to run their government. I mean, that's what boils down to. We're here. We can show you how to do justice because we do it so well here in the United States. I mean, just look at Roger Stone. Look at Roger Stone. Look at all these people that are being prosecuted for being in Trump's orbit. Look at all these people who have been railroaded into prison. And it's not just famous people. It's not just political people. It's anybody who is accused of a crime has an uphill fight to get themselves off of the, out of the system without pleading to something.
Yeah, that's how you know that you're dealing with people that are not part of the system that they're reforming. When I was listening to that hearing, what I heard was the same kind of talk that I heard in business meetings and, when we were designing systems. As a contractor, we'd go meet with clients and so forth because our focus was the system. Our business was not whatever the business was that we were automating. Our business was the systems. And that's what these people are. Their business is the system, not the actual function that they're trying to automate. Because I'll bet you've never heard a law enforcement guy say, in the law enforcement space, they don't talk like that.
Yeah, that's Silicon Valley speak.
That's right. Silicon Valley has spaces because automation is
we're operating in the social media
sectors.
space.
It's in space. It's a virtual reality.
They're
it's
in
not
space,
the reality on the ground of what they're automating.
Yeah, they're in space, all right. They're way out there. Yeah, well, and I'm glad to be sharing this moment here with you, Vicky, in the talk show space.
Yes. That's where we are. We are in the talk show
We also
space.
have one foot in the podcast space, too. So it's good to be, it's good to have space. And,
I like space.
Yeah, space is nice, except that they want to tax you for it.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, talking about sending Americans down to Mexico to be prosecuted and sentenced to Mexican prisons for selling guns. Did you catch this comment? This is what one of these characters in this hearing is actually advocating for.
I want to switch over to another question. The GAO reports show that 70% of the guns seized in Mexico by Mexican authorities come from America. What do we do when do we track that to find out who they came from here in America? And if so, what do we do? Do we have extradition laws that allow that person to go to Mexico if those guns were involved in a crime?
So we do work closely with the government of Mexico to track those guns. ATF is present at the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City, and in the cases where we have tracking information where there are serial numbers on the guns, there's cooperation to share that with U.S. law enforcement so that we can track back.
Have we sent our people down there that have been?
We have U.S. law enforcement officials in Mexico.
No, the person that broke the law here selling the guns, have we sent them to Mexican prisons for their judicial system?
I would have to check with DOJ on specific cases. I can't recall off the top of my head cases, but that doesn't mean that.
Would that be a strong deterrent if we did?
I would assume it would be a very strong deterrent. Yes.
So let's go ahead and send Americans down to Mexican prisons. What a great idea.
Do you know, that reminds me, I remember a few years ago there was a discussion of sending Idaho prisoners not only just out of state, but out of the country because it would be cheaper. And I was so offended by the idea. I thought, they might be criminals, but there are criminals.
Well,
no.
We and
should,
they might not be criminals.
If we put them in jail, they should be in jail where we can make sure that they do their time, but they're not mistreated,
They might be criminals, but they might not be criminals. People are falsely accused all the time.
Well, that's true. But in general, people that are in jail probably did something to
I don't agree with that.
Earn their way there.
I don't agree with that because, see, that's the problem.
I'm talking about the majority, not the exception.
Well,
not the exception.
There's a presumption there. The problem is that I think a lot of people think that, and you have to start with the presumption of innocence. But when we're having
because people that are in jail, people that are in prison, they've already been convicted. There's no more presumptions.
In this day and age, to me, the conviction. When we started off the show talking about this kangaroo court, how the judge was acting basically as wouldn't allow certain jurors who were well known to be biased on this jury, wouldn't allow the defense to dismiss them. And I'm talking again about the Roger Stone thing simply because it's going on right now.
And I agree with you on that case. Those cases, I believe, are done.
But every case is like this. That's the whole point. They're all against you.
I don't think the majority in our criminal justice system are like that.
I do. Yeah, look at the Bundys. Look at what they were up against, and they got off. But it was a miracle they got off.
Well, that was
only because of the federal government was so corrupt, trying to rig it.
Are in prison for doing violent crime. They did something where there's a real victim. What the Bundys were doing, there was no victim in what the Bundys were doing.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you that there are some violent offenders. There are people that deserve to be in prison, and that's one reason why. That's one reason why this whole thing with. I lost my train of thought now. Oh, there's a movement right now going on to try to do away with incarceration. I don't know if you've been following this at all. There's actually people that are pushing.
I would absolutely oppose that. Because there are some real monsters out there. One of the things that I do quite a bit of is I watch those live PD things, and I watch a lot of the criminal cases, where they have the whole history there. And there's some real monsters out there. And there are some really stupid people, that end up, that the police encounter. And they're doing stupid things that could hurt other people or themselves, or they have done it. So I'm not in favor of eliminating prisons.
No, there's a reason why we set up prisons.
Unless we just take them out and shoot them, then okay.
Well, that wouldn't be good either. Because honestly, the criminal justice system should be geared toward rehabilitation whenever that's possible. Now, you might argue, and I think with some merit, that rapists, especially serial rapists. Now, and that's a problem too, and I don't want to get into too deep of a discussion here because we're going to get off our original topic. But you could make the case that not every rapist is the same, and by that I mean that there are people that are accused. For instance, you got a guy that's accused of raping his wife. Okay, I would put that in a much different category. Even though rape is serious and nobody should be raping anybody. But, he's married to her. They have a prior relationship. He's probably not a general threat to society, necessarily. You see what I'm getting at? So I would characterize that differently than from somebody who is just going around serially raping people off the street or something. So, I mean, that is an example of somebody that I think probably, maybe he needs to be he deserves to be punished for his crime if, in fact, he committed it. But, but getting back to the point here, there are people in high places with some influence that are actually pushing for the elimination of prisons because prisons are racist, because they incarcerate so many blacks.
Well, those people are idiots.
Well, absolutely. But there are a lot of them in the Democratic Party that are doing this idiots. Right now.
They're dangerous idiots.
Absolutely they are. And I think we're going to have to talk a little bit more about this in the coming days, because this is a movement that I think is gaining steam. And
they've already
insane.
That no bail deal that they passed in New York, where they're not requiring any bail for all kinds of crimes. Basically, they're giving a license to commit crime in New York, certain kinds of crime, and it includes violent crime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they're giving those people a license to commit crime, is basically what they're doing. Whenever the legislature legislates absolutely that it will be this way or that way, then you've got a problem.
I think in California,
because they will be releasing people who should not be released, and the other way, they keep people in jail that shouldn't be. So if we had judges that did their job and evaluated people based on whether they actually are a threat to society, then you wouldn't have to have legislation saying, let everybody go or incarcerate everybody. That's the kind of stupidity that I have a hard time dealing with.
I think it's California that they've passed some law. I think it's California. I'm not sure. If I'm wrong.
No, the one I just talked about is New York.
No, I'm talking about something else. I'm talking about the fact that they have decided not to, like, for instance, if somebody breaks into a car, they're not going to punish that crime because it's a minor crime. I believe it
depends on if it's your car or not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it gets a little more major when it's yours. But right. but this is what this is the insane stuff that they're talking about. We got to prioritize. Well, how about you just punish it all? But no, I mean, so there is a movement afoot to get away from enforcing the laws. And what can we assume about this? You know, this idea that prisons are racist because they incarcerate more blacks than any other race, so therefore they must be racist. Well, what if blacks are committing more crimes?
How about if they just take race indicator?
How about if they do what?
Take race indicator off of the statistics.
Well, see, that's the thing. They don't want to do that because they're trying to make an argument. They're trying to create their dialectic. Mm-hmm. And their dialectic is to use racism. You know, the dialectic is prisons are racist. We want to get rid of prisons. And I'm like, why in the world would you ever want to do that?
You know what? It makes me wonder, what is their objective? Because I don't believe the people that are running the government of California are that stupid. I don't believe they're stupid. So there has to be an objective there somewhere. So what's the objective? Maybe it is to have the state taken over by a commission.
The only objective I can see is to create such a chaos because, you know, out of chaos they create order. So if you want to create a situation where there's such social disorder and social unrest and so much chaos in the streets, killing and everything else, that you turn around and create such a havoc, and that would be give them an excuse maybe to declare martial law.
Right. Well, it would be kind of like putting the state into receivership, you know, where you have a committee running the state, and because it's so out of control.
Yeah.
That seems logical to me that would be an objective of a dialectic that makes no sense whatsoever. It doesn't make any sense to release people who commit crimes.
We got a call on the line. Let's go ahead and take the caller from Arizona. Hello, you're on the air. Hello, caller. Hello, you're on the air. Going once. Going twice.
Are you sure it's hooked up?
Yeah, it's hooked up. I don't know what happened, but evidently maybe they're listening to the radio or something.
Maybe they can call back in if they didn't get through.
Yeah. Anyway, continuing on here, and we're almost up to the break time already. They're talking about, in this hearing, corruption of law enforcement.
So I'd like to begin with a question to you, Mr. Glenn, and you, Ms. Feinstein, about how corruption very specifically impacts your work, starting with you, Mr. Glenn. And if you can be specific about corruption, not general.
Corruption, so our focus is on improving law enforcement.
Okay, now listen to what this guy says here. I'll tell you what. We'll let's pick this up after the break, okay? Because what they're going to be talking about here is very important. The police chief, I mean, things are so corrupt down in Mexico right now. I mean, and we're supposed to be working with them to train their legal people and to revamp their system and everything. And what he's about to say in this hearing demonstrates what an uphill and insane fight this is. I mean, the corruption is so thoroughly entrenched that what we're up against is just mind-boggling. That'll be a good cliffhanger for people. We're at the top of the hour. Hour number 3 of Govern America is straight ahead. If you'd like to call in, you can. 610-600-1776. That's 610-600-1776. Or toll-free 844-6-GOVERN. We'll be back here in just a moment.
Before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order. This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks. Vicky Davis is here as well. It continues to be the 15th of February, 2020, and we're talking about the North American Union and the Merida Agreement, or Merida Initiative is what it's called. And real quick, before we get back into the discussion about that, though, I see the Federal Reserve is looking at creating they're looking at a broad range of issues, according to Reuters, around digital payments and currencies, including policy, design, and legal considerations around potentially issuing its own digital currency, according to Governor Lael Brainard, and he said that on Wednesday. So I just thought this was an important thing to talk about real briefly. Brainard's remarks, they say, suggest more openness to the possibility of a Fed-issued digital coin than in the past. He says, by transforming payments, digitalization has the potential to deliver greater value, and convenience at a lower cost.
I think that's all part of what is the beginning of the transition to the new economic system based on technocracy.
Yes.
I've gone back and I was listening to Greenspan. I have this one clip of Alan Greenspan in 1990 that I think is hugely important. I'm writing an article about it now, but I didn't quite get it done because with Greenspan, you almost have to use toothpicks to keep your eyes open, because he lulls you to sleep with his droning on.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
But what he was saying was really, really important.
He's not exactly Mr. Excitement.
No.
And then we have this also. Hospitals use Experian's secret credit scores to determine who will receive medical care. That's an article from Mass Private Eye. 3,100 hospitals and healthcare systems are now giving patients a secret credit score before they are seen or treated. Thousands of hospitals and healthcare providers use Experian's patient financial clearance system to determine who will receive medical care based on their ability to pay their bills. Experian.
That's wrong.
Yeah.
That is a wrong thing to do.
Experian likes to use superfluous words to hide the fact that their system determines who will receive medical care. They say using comprehensive data and advanced analytics, this is Experian talking, our patient financial clearance solution makes the payment process a positive one by assessing and assigning each patient to the appropriate financial pathway based on their unique financial situation.
You know what? That's the monster.
That's
they are doing with the financialization of everything. They're converting our economy away from an economy for humans, for human beings,
human capital,
into a commercial system where everything is based on money and the ability to earn, and what assets do you have. It's an inhuman system that they are converting to.
They say comprehensive data and advanced analytics makes the payment process a positive one. It's just a corporate jargon for using data mining to determine if a patient is a good credit risk. So anyway, this article will be in the show notes, as will the previous I read. Very important stuff.
That's very upsetting to me. I'll have to look into that because that's inhuman.
Yeah.
It makes medical care just another business, but it is not just another business.
We have a couple of calls on the line as well, and folks, you're welcome to join in as well. 610-600-1776. That's 610-600-1776, or toll free 844-6-GOVERN. Hello, caller. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say, before anybody gives me hell for saying that, let me just say, as long as our government puts in even a nickel into the healthcare system, it should be a system based on humanity as opposed to a financial system. But our government subsidizes absolutely everything in healthcare. Subsidize hospitals. They subsidize medical research, the pharmaceutical industry. Absolutely everything is subsidized by our government. So if capitalist system where we have people laying in the street dying, that's fine. Okay, let's do that. But before we do that, let's take every damn dollar, every damn federal dollar out of the system.
Yeah, well, that's probably not going to happen. But anyway, caller, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hey, Darren. Hey, Vicky.
Hi.
You were talking earlier about the Vicky. You mentioned that. You and Darren were talking about that no bail law in New York, and it brought to mind. It brought to mind here. What was it? Early last year, or it might have been near to the end of 2018. When I believe it was somewhere in Texas, policies had been established that said police would not arrest people for stealing.
Yes.
If they could say, well, I needed that particular item. Like, I needed those shoes, so it's okay for me to steal it. I need to eat tonight, so it's okay for me to steal. And this is what it put me in the mind of, and I'm thinking, this is how crazy it's gotten. I mean, I believe that, bail should be set based upon a set of standards, as outlined in the Bill of Rights, where it talks about excessive bail. And we have excessive bail today. So the bail rate policies today, I believe, are absolutely out of control, and they need to go back to that Bill of Rights and read what it says about excessive bail, and what it says about bail in general. But this whole concept that this is somehow going to curb racism, I mean, this is insane. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, it is.
Out in Oakland, it's like out in Oakland, and I forget where else. There was somewhere, Minneapolis. Oakland, California, San Francisco area, and Minneapolis, creating these policies that say single housing dwelling is racist. So you have to have a duplex or a triplex or an apartment building. You can't have a single-family home. These laws that they passed out in California just recently that are or policies they're trying to get in place now, where you have to provide a rest space on your property for homeless people to have a place to rest.
Yeah.
It's residential and commercial. It doesn't mean this is crazy.
Well, this is the communitarian system, Art. I mean, this is what it is. You don't have any absolute rights anymore. You don't have property rights, and squatters' rights really are kind of in my thinking, are a part of that. Although historically, I could see why squatter rights are the supposedly it's a strike at the wealthy who have a lot of land and they don't ever use the land. They just buy it all up, and So I mean, there are, I guess, two ways to look at it, but the whole thing is designed to break down absolute rights of the individual, property rights, your ability to have. Go ahead, Vicky.
Well, I was going to say that's because the United Nations is based on rights as privileges given to people by government, as opposed to our system, which is that.
Which is what?
The government is given rights to operate as a government, and everything that is not specified in the Constitution, we are free. So it's reversed, but what they're trying to do is to harmonize all of the systems of government, and so that means they've got to break our Constitution, because our Constitution is different than the United Nations and the Charter of Human Rights and all of that stuff.
Yeah, I wanted to do a real quick correction too. I said earlier that California said that they were going to stop prosecuting minor crimes like car break-ins and that sort of thing. I believe it wasn't California, it was in Oregon, according to what I'm digging up. In Multnomah County, Oregon, to be specific.
That's Portland, I believe.
Yes. And they've decided to stop prosecuting dozens of illegal acts. And I'm trying to find in here. This is the Oregonian. There's probably some examples in here, but I've been hearing about that. But what it really boils down to is a breakdown in criminal justice, real criminal justice. When you're allowing thieves to go.
The reason why I started researching refugee resettlement to begin with was because the same thing that Art was talking about, people, a refugee broke into this guy's garage and the police wouldn't arrest him because the guy, he was from some third world country, and apparently in his country that if you find something and you need it, you just take it.
Yeah, they say in Clackamas County, which can afford to pursue many of the misdemeanors Multnomah County is not, prosecutors have eased up on first-time shoplifters who steal less than $1,000 worth of merchandise.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, they are cited for violations if they immediately agree to plead guilty. Reductions among Oregon prosecutors mirror a national trend. See, these things don't just come out of nowhere. This isn't just something that they just decided on their own. Hey, we're just going to quit prosecuting crimes. This is a concerted effort, you can bet.
Yes, absolutely.
Reductions among Oregon prosecutors mirror a national trend, with prosecutors across the country laying off staff. The down economy has hurt, and violent crime in the United States is down. In Oregon, crime was at a 40-year low in 2009, although so far in 2010, some crime rates, including car thefts, have been ticking up in Portland. Now, this is a 2010 article, and it was right after the great downturn of 2008, where they nearly crashed everything. But
there should be some penalty for doing that. I don't think people should necessarily go to jail for shoplifting, but they sure as heck can, do a couple weeks of community service.
They should be forced to go out and dig ditches.
Yeah,
they should be forced to show up every day like they would be working at a job, to teach them a work ethic. Get off your duff and go to work and quit stealing stuff. Hard labor.
I was reading an article just a couple weeks ago, and this is coming out of Alabama. This is how crazy it's gotten. In Alabama, and I forget where it was, I think it was Montgomery, Alabama, if I remember correctly, there was an article about they were doing all this whining and crying and complaining, talking about debtors' prison. Mm-hmm. When you read the article, if you really pay attention to the article, they've got the people that this is an old motel, which has basically been turned into a work release program where you go to work every day. You have to come back there at the end of the day, and that's where if you're not at work, you're there. And you're there until you pay off your debt. There was a woman who was convicted for embezzling something like $13,000. And so she was sentenced to live there, work her job, and this is a work release, so she doesn't have to go to prison. But this is racist.
Yeah.
To insist that she make reparations to the people she embezzled the money from, and instead of going to prison, honey, where you're not going to be able to work and make money and make restitution, we're going to let you go to this work release where at least you can come out, you get to talk to people, you're not behind a set of bars 24/7, but that's racist. And this is in Alabama.
Yeah.
And this was just like a month ago. I mean, guys, this is...
Yeah, the insane are running the asylum today. It's really crazy.
It is. The inmates are running the asylum.
Yep.
Guys, love it.
Hey, thanks, Art.
Podcast.
Yep.
Talk to you later.
Yep, take it easy. There he is, Art. And let's move on. We got other calls on the line. Let's go to New York and take the next caller. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Good.
Hi. I'm just I'm listening to all these laws being decriminalized, all these things being decriminalized all over the country, and I think that Tucker Carlson had covered this on Fox News, and this is what's going on. I think he mentioned Soros and possibly the Koch brothers in combination with this, they're going around the country buying up sheriffs and DAs. Or getting them into their positions, and then from there working on decriminalizing all these things. So in New York, for example, I think that petty theft has been decriminalized. Prostitution has been decriminalized. Urinating in public, jumping the turnstiles, all those things. So I guess this is just to create as much havoc as possible, but there's definitely money behind it. There's definitely the Open Society.
Yeah, there's no question. There's an orchestrated effort to do this.
Society NGO.
Yeah, because this is just so off the charts crazy.
I think Bloomberg is involved in that too, where he's providing free legal counsel to, I don't know if it's cities or counties or whatever, but he's offering to provide attorneys to work within our justice system on issues that he wants. I mean, so the corruption is not just at the
corruption is thoroughly entrenched. The thing is that at the same time they're flooding our countries with illegals, and we got this drug trafficking cartels, beheadings on the border, people hanging from overpasses, just south of the border, and they're letting all these asylum seekers in. There's an orchestrated effort to send caravans of people in here to flood our country. All of that's going on at the same time, and then they want to decriminalize and do away with federal penitentiaries under the guise of racism. So
take guns away,
and disarm the public so that you don't have the ability to defend yourself. Exactly right. So what are we to make of this, other than the fact that they want to create social disorder and unrest to the point where they call in the troops? I hate to go there. I hate to be.
Well, can I just? I think that the push is for a federalized police force, and the same thing in Europe. I mean, Europe is just a madhouse too. I don't know if they have an EU-wide police force, but our policing is at the local and the state level. I mean, could this be that they want a federal police force, which is what we don't have? John Birch Society brought that up.
Yeah, well, there's no question
Absolutely.
They're moving in that direction.
Yeah. In the 1990s, what they did is, with the New World Order, they wanted to eliminate the military, and that's when they started training military to be more like a hybrid cop and military, and it's all eventually for a global police force, which means, of course, you've got to, in the United States, the way they started that here, they started with the enhanced 911 system, getting the sheriffs across county borders to sign agreements with each other to
Skype is
law enforcement in their counties. And supposedly it was for the enhanced 911. But as you see this thing roll out, you can see the evolution of it, beginning with the consolidation of law enforcement and then moving up to higher levels of government where you have partnerships of county officials across, county lines, and it's regionalization of everything, which of course destroys our form of government.
Yeah.
It's replacing our form of government.
Did you have another comment there, caller?
No. I just wanted to bring that up. That the money that's behind this, what the source, from what I remember, I know Tucker Carlson was on this months ago, but I've been hearing about this for years now, that because of terrorism and because of all of these other problems that we have, we need a federal police force. So
yeah, well, they're moving in that direction. I mean, with the fusion centers and everything, they're databasing people locally. And so all of it really is a federalization of the police force. I was in Washington, D.C. several years ago, and their police cars in Washington, D.C. already have Homeland Security written on the side of it. At least when I was there, it did. So I could see how, with these grants flowing into these local police departments, these grants flowing into local communities, they have to adopt the programs, the federal regulations and policies when they accept the money. And when they accept the money, it harmonizes everything that they're doing to the point where it is a de facto federalization, even if it's not an overt one.
Right. I have an article here that was written in 2015 by a guy up in northern Idaho, and it's about the special assistant U.S. attorneys. Mm-hmm. Okay, there was a proposal. I don't know if they did this or not, but it was a federal assistance program to provide special assistant U.S. attorneys at the state level. And he says, according to the federal proposal, the purpose of SAUSA, which is what it was called, I guess, is to prosecute offenders in federal court instead of state court. And the crimes to be targeted by SAUSA are gun crime, gang crime, drug trafficking, terrorism, identity theft, and immigration offenses. And so, I'll give you the link for the show notes so that people can read this. But that was a program for the feds to provide state attorneys for our states to use. And
yeah, this is it's just insane. Hey, thanks for the call. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's just amazing how much money and effort goes into creating destruction, much less than keeping order, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, and that's a good word for it. It is creative destruction of our country.
Yep.
And it's intentional, and it's because they're moving to a new system of governance.
Yep, there you go. Hey, appreciate the call. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to move on. We got one other call. I think Jerry is back from Texas, so go ahead. You're on the air.
I'm sorry, but the Napoleonic law is, I think, is what it's called, guilty till proven innocent. A lot of the Hispanic nations south of us have that law, if I understand it correctly.
I think Louisiana did too. I was reading about that Napoleonic law, and Louisiana was the only state in the Union that used Napoleonic law.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm still in the middle of milking and what have you, but I just want to throw that out just for what it's worth. Thanks for taking my call, Darren.
Hey, no, thank you. Thanks for calling in. Appreciate the input. All right, there he is, Jerry in Texas. Appreciate all the callers, and you're welcome to join in. 610-600-1776. That's 610-600-1776, or toll-free 844-6-GOVERN. We're almost up to the break, but I want to go ahead and play some of this audio. We were talking earlier about the gosh, I'm blanking. What is the name?
We were talking about something. Just play the audio.
The North American Union.
So I'd like to begin with...
This is, by the way, speaks to the corruption of law enforcement. That's what we were talking about earlier. With the corruption of law enforcement in Mexico, this is what we're up against, folks, as we try to rebuild their system.
So I'd like to begin with a question to you, Mr. Glenn, and you, Ms. Feinstein, about how corruption very specifically impacts your work, starting with you, Mr. Glenn. And if you can be specific about corruption, not general.
Corruption, so our focus is on improving law enforcement. And so our focus, our anti-corruption efforts in the past and going forward as well, will be on how do we eliminate or how do we help the Mexican government eliminate corruption within their public security forces.
But can you talk about that? I want to hear specifically about that corruption in the security forces.
Sure, but I think we have at least the alleged conduct of the former head of the federal police, Garcia Luna, who was arrested recently, I believe, in Dallas. He was, at the time that I was in Mexico, one of our principal interlocutors. So obviously that shakes the trust that we have, but we in in order to do the work that we do, we have to work with those who the government of Mexico has in place. We do our best to vet. Not only do we do the Leahy vetting that's on the human rights side, but we also do the internal vetting to make sure that, to the best of our knowledge, our partners are with us and not against us.
So there you go. The main guy that they were working with is somebody that turns out to be on the other side. You know, this is a law enforcement official, one of the top law enforcement officials there, and they find out that he's arrested for corruption.
Well, I don't know if you've been, watching all across our country, but there is a massive movement to arrest corrupt officials. Our system of government across all levels of government seems to have become as corrupt as we knew Mexico's government was.
Yeah, well, the ones that should be in prison are never the ones that really end up there. We'll be back here, folks. Stay with us.
Where the spooks go to find out what's really going on. This is Govern America.
All right, we're in the home stretch of the broadcast. This is Govern America. GovernAmerica.com is the website. TheTechnocraticTyranny.com is Vicky's website. And as we continue on here, we got another call on the line. But real quickly here, before we go to the caller, I would like to get, just do a few more of these audio clips here, because I want to finish up with this agreement, this initiative, Merida Initiative, that we've been talking about for the last couple of hours here. Very important stuff. So just hang on just a moment, caller, and we'll get to you as quickly as we can. The issue, and we've been talking about criminal justice, violent crime in Mexico, and how the United States is working with Mexico in a bilateral partnership. High-level working groups are working on this to solve the issue of criminal justice in Mexico when we can't even figure it out here in the United States. But they get to this phrase, crime and violent space, which you referenced earlier, Vicky. And it sounds to me like a lot of social work.
Within the crime and violence space, that we've had an evolution where at the beginning, there might have been a thought, okay, let's go to the violent areas and provide opportunity to underprivileged communities, and that will probably reduce violence. Well, in fact, the evidence shows that that is not a very successful approach. Instead, what you need to do is target more effectively who are those individuals that are most likely to be perpetrators of crime or victims of crime. Consider those your at-risk communities and actually look at the interventions that work most effectively. So that might be cognitive behavioral therapy, family-based counseling, a variety of mechanisms, bringing the different parts together, and that is what we're doing, and that's where we're seeing results. And on the municipal model, we're pleased to see that the government of Mexico has taken that civic justice model that I mentioned before, that we piloted in Escobedo and in Morelia, and that they've scaled that up beyond that to different parts of the country.
Okay, so
now, see, if I were a police chief and that woman walked through my door, I'd throw her out.
Maybe throw her in the cell for a while.
She's an analyst. She's talking about systems, data analytics, and systems that can be accommodated or that can be managed through computer systems.
It's pre-crime.
She's not talking about on-the-ground crime and criminals and victims and the real system, the real human part of policing.
She's talking about also pre-crime, determining who's likely to commit a crime, and that's all pre-crime stuff. That's Minority Report stuff. This is the type of stuff that we talk about here with all this Homeland Security stuff and the fusion centers and everything. I mean,
that's where data and analytics comes into play.
Look for these fusion centers to develop in Mexico, ladies and gentlemen, because they're coming. And it's all going to be a part of a North American database.
That's what created the situation for the Parkland shooting. They implemented community policing, and the crime statistics had to go down in order for that sheriff, I think, what was his name, Stephen Israel or something like that. The crime statistics had to go down in order for him to get more money. So they just stopped reporting it. They didn't arrest, young people that got in trouble. They just shuffled them off to cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yes, exactly. Social work. Again, it's the same trend everywhere, and everything we're talking about, there's a vibe that goes through, a thread that goes through it all. And then they have insane, ridiculous programs that just don't work. And here's another example of that.
Owned the concerns that we have about the levels of violence, particularly in the northern tier of Mexico. They have committed to us to provide the same protections to the migrants as they do to their citizens, to U.S. citizens that are traveling in the area as well. Obviously,
but I guess that's my point. I mean, the statistics don't prove out that it's safe for their own citizens. I mean, Tijuana, I live in San Diego, one of the safest, largest cities in the United States. Across the border in Tijuana, they have the murder capital of the world. And yet a lot of the migrants that are sent to Tijuana, they're not from Tijuana, experience this incredible level of violence against them. I mean, when you say they're returned and they're going to provide safety as they do for their own citizens, well, it's not safe. That's the whole point.
I agree with you, sir. The levels of violence are of tremendous concern, and I think the government of Mexico shares that concern and is appropriately focused on it. But this is a large-scale problem. We assist through the Merida Initiative in the ways that we can. But my understanding from the government of Mexico is that they understand the problem and are focused on it.
My time has expired. The only thing I'd like to add is I'm not sure about this hugs thing either, that the new president says hugs instead of bullets. I'm not sure that's going to work. Thank you.
Hugs, not bullets, Vicky. Hugs, not bullets. This is the president of Mexico promoting this idea that we should have hugs, not bullets. Now, where do you think he got such a cockamamie idea? Where do you think he got such
from people who wear suits and ties and live and work
from
in
the
Washington,
people right
D.C.?
here in the United States? Good old America. Good old America. Here's a report from WDIV from 2016.
Police, of course, work year-round to put an end to gun violence, but specifically they're looking toward New Year's Eve and what is really a dangerous tradition for some.
And as Local 4's Evrod Cassimy explains, they brought in extra help to get their message out.
It's become an annual tradition here in Metro Detroit. As we are in the middle of the holiday season, law enforcement officials are encouraging you to celebrate with a hug and not gunfire.
There's no place in the city of Detroit for celebratory gunfire. There's no place in the city for irresponsible gun owners.
These words from Detroit Police Chief James Craig, joined by Detroit public school students, as the 13th annual Hugs Not Bullets campaign kicked off today inside the Detroit Public Safety Headquarters building in downtown Detroit. The campaign is aimed at reducing celebratory gunfire and year-round gun violence here in Metro Detroit. The campaign focuses on student-led activities that involve community and classroom workshops on gun violence, celebratory gunfire, bullying, and gang activity. The Hugs Not Bullets campaign also includes distributing trigger locks and gun safety brochures throughout the community, in addition to the community workshops that they already have in place. In Detroit, Evrod Cassimy, Local 4.
All right, Evrod, and the campaign is a collaborative effort between Detroit Police and the neighborhood service organization's Youth Initiatives Project.
Hugs are always better. They're always going to win. Yeah.
That's what criminals need. They just need hugs.
Yeah.
Just a little hug. Especially when they're trying to decapitate you and hang your body from an overpass. Just give them a hug.
Yeah.
Everything will be fine.
No problem.
Anyway, caller on the line. Thanks for holding on. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Good morning.
Hey, hi.
Thank you, Darren, and both of you for mentioning the communitarian word again. Hats off to you. This is crucially important.
Yeah, absolutely. It is only everything that's going on right now. Hey, you're in Oregon. Can you answer me? Have you heard anything about this situation where they're not prosecuting the crimes? I was kind of wondering if you were calling in about that, because I'm wondering if has there been any talk in your neck of the woods about that?
Jenna, my sweetheart secretary, says yes. I am fairly busy doing other things. I haven't heard of it, so no, that's not why I'm calling in.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, Oregon, Washington, we are just surrounded by people I don't want to know. And I'm here to talk in the turn of the century. And Maurice Strong's, nephew, niece, grandmother, 1900s, was at the University of Washington. This is Maurice Strong's grandma or something. She's a complete communist communitarian from 100 years back. So I kind of removed myself from that. Plus, we have all these dead trees to process and figure out. Well, we could throw all this crap into a burn pile and turn it to ash, or we could make charcoal and start trying to reverse this agricultural nightmare that we cannot accomplish without making charcoal. There's solutions out there. Employment in the rural. Really, that's not why I'm calling, and I know we're short on time. Lark is going to be discussing how come the 5G nightmare resistance is not going anywhere with a Dr. Martin Paul on Monday, 2 o'clock Pacific time. The link is in the chat.
Okay.
So he's Professor Emeritus at Washington State University, and he thinks it's greed behind all this and corruption of organizations. But what we finally got is this Irish guy to have Lark on a couple times, find out what communitarianism really is. And finally, and that's on Monday, Dr. Paul is going to come on with Lark, and they are going to discuss, well, what is the system behind all this? How can
where is he going to? Where is he going to? You said the link is in the chat room. For those that don't maybe have
Yep.
can't easily get to the chat room.
I type in grism.blogspot.
Okay.
And something called Mammy's SHIT is your next click.
All right.
It's kind of not the perfect word choice I would have used to get popular, but those limeys in Britain do things funny, and it's unfortunate that they want to make that so unappealing. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Very good.
The link, but what I wanted to get across to you is the reason why we realize Dr. Paul needs to discuss this with Lark is because we went through this with the charcoal making. Are we going to change the system into a socialist Greta Thunberg nightmare?
Lord, I hope not.
To do this? Or can individuals just go out and contract with people, hey, you have a dead tree amongst 10 others, and your garden looks like crap, it's full of bugs, blah, blah. Anyway, we learned this biochar lesson of how we can move forward with this.
Mm-hmm.
Problem that ended up happening is along came something called solar radiation management, chemtrails. Jim Lee back in South Carolina, he's a first-rate investigator. Unfortunately, he's addicted to video games and pushing electronics so that he can play his gizmo games, and that's his solution to chemtrails is monitoring with a bunch of electronics. So he and Lark talked for hours, and finally Jim starts to say, okay, it's communitarian law. I'll say at first grade it's communitarian law, but he doesn't talk about the system of communitarianism. It's a separate but connected. Along comes, and this is hot off the press 2 days ago, a guy named Jamie Lee, similar name. He's a 5G fighter down in California, Sonoma. There's a bunch of activists trying to battle the 5G nightmare. Unfortunately, the chemtrail nightmare, they're interrelated. Regardless, we called this Jamie Lee up a year ago and started talking about his use of the word community and how come everything has to be done in a movement Why can't individuals go and tackle this? Well, so here is Jamie Lee and Jim Lee that need to get to the bottom of their difficulties right now, and we're going to put a link to this in the chat as
Okay.
well.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah, appreciate the call and appreciate the heads up on that. Thank you very much.
They need to eliminate individualism. Everything has to be, everybody has to be part of a group. It's all group management.
Yeah. And that's not to say that we shouldn't work together, and that's not to say that we don't have certain things in common.
People always worked together.
We
I
need
remember
numbers.
when I was a kid, when the river would overflow, all the men would get out and they'd sandbag the river. They worked together when they needed to, but they were all individuals. But that's not what this is.
It's a balancing away of our rights. You know,
communism in the sense of there are no individuals. We're all in the community.
Yes. The rights of the individual are balanced away in light of the well-being of the common good. What's called the common good. It's really not the common good, because I think individual liberty is the real common good. But
yes, I agree.
They use the guise of doing this. Hey, thanks for the call. I appreciate it. They use the guise of the common good, the guise of community, and I've said before, historically, community is common unity. It's people coming together for a common purpose. There's another one of the buzz phrases, and that historically is a good thing. The way it's being used now is using that historically, something that's historically been a good thing, using it as marketing to shove a robbery of your individual rights down your throat. Communitarianism and what's called common good or common purpose, or all these nice sounding names today, are really just a balancing away of the rights of the individual. We were talking about property rights earlier. Mm-hmm. That's a good example of that. The Kelo versus New London Supreme Court decision, which gutted people, property owners' ability to stand firm against eminent domain for private purposes. That's a perfect example of communitarian law. That's a perfect example of a communitarian Supreme Court decision. When somebody, because, we've had eminent domain around forever. But generally, eminent domain has always been used for public purposes, like highways, roads, things where they have to, they're trying to build a highway, for instance, the interstate system, whatever, and you got somebody that doesn't want to sell their land, and they got to take the highway through there. You got one holdout or something. They say, all right, fine, you know what? We're going to take your land. We'll give you something, what we deem as a fair market value, and we can argue whether that's real or not when you're not in a position to negotiate. But be that as it may, that's a public purpose. This Supreme Court Kelo decision brought it into private, where everything, now if you got a big corporation that comes to town and they decide that they want to build something on your land, they'll take your land because they've got more money than you do. They have the ability to hire people, to create more jobs for the quote unquote community. And so that's of more value than your house sitting there, like Mrs. Kelo.
Yeah, Idaho did pass a law prohibiting private eminent domain.
Yeah, and every state
so they
should.
Can't do that in Idaho.
Well, that's great. It's and I know there was a rush, and I don't know how many actually did, but there was a rush after that decision for a number of local governments to either pass ordinances or states to pass laws prohibiting that, because that was a watershed decision. It was a monumental decision, and it's a huge weakening of personal individual property rights.
Yes.
And
one of the worst decisions ever.
I think it was Sandra Day O'Connor who was making the argument. What's to stop then let's say, a Motel 6 from losing their land to a Hilton.
That's true.
She was running down all through all these scenarios. It's really dangerous. If somebody can make more money off your land and provide a benefit to the quote-unquote community, then, look, individual property rights are going to lose out every time. And I made that argument at the time this was going on. But that's just one example of communitarianism. And so it is a balancing away of your individual rights. And we're seeing that with this North American Union. That's why they said building a North American community.
Yes. Yep, because they're changing the entire paradigm. And the paradigm begins and ends with language, how you describe something.
Mm-hmm. So I guess we got some time to get into Grendel.
Okay, wait a sec. Let me tell you something.
Okay.
On the second to the last clip that you played, the guy mentioned Leahy vetting. Did you hear him say that? We were talking about the corruption of the Mexican police. And the guy testified, we did do Leahy vetting. So I looked that up. It turns out that Senator Patrick Leahy put a statutory provision into U.S. law prohibiting use of funds for assistance to foreign security forces where there is credible information implicating that unit in the commission of gross violations of human rights. Okay, and they define violations of human rights as being, torture, extrajudicial killing, enforced disappearance, and rape under color of law. I don't know how you'd have rape under color of law, but whatever. But anyway, so he apparently set up this law to requiring these conditions to be met before a foreign entity can get U.S. federal funds. But the problem with that is that if you consider these as standards for hiring, then somebody who is a local criminal, if he doesn't violate those standards, then he meets the criteria.
Yeah.
See, so.
Yeah, it's a train wreck. This whole
right.
thing.
Standards are a double-edged sword in that way.
Yeah, exactly. Grendel did an interview with a man from the New American. I think this was Alex Newman, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it is.
He does excellent work. Both of them do excellent work. But this interview was about the USMCA. See how this dovetails perfectly with the North American community we've been talking about? We've covered some of this on the past shows, but it bears repeating. The cure to NAFTA is worse than the disease of NAFTA.
Obviously, we all have our own desires as far as what we're seeking to advance as far as U.S.-Ukraine relations. My connection to Ukraine, obviously, we have a significant...
Okay, you know what? I just screwed up.
I was trying to figure out how that was related.
Well, this is the clip I'm looking for.
It really pains me to have to say it, but unfortunately this deal is actually worse than NAFTA in basically every respect. Overall, I think all you really need to know about it is that the Council on Foreign Relations loves it. Their president, Richard Haas, came out and said it's like NAFTA and TPP plus sort of the 10 or 20%. And Trump was quite right when he said NAFTA and TPP were some of the worst trade deals ever. And he was even more right when he spoke in Vietnam last year, about a year ago, when he said that the real problem with these trade deals is not even so much the terrible deal, and they are terrible deals. I mean, we need to be honest about that. These trade deals have basically been responsible for shipping our jobs and our productive capacity and our technology and our ability to produce things overseas, particularly to communist China, but also to Mexico and other countries. But the real problem with these, Trump said, was that they surrender our sovereignty and our independence and our ability to govern ourselves. And if that's the yardstick, this new trade agreement is significantly worse than NAFTA. It sets up an array of North American bureaucracies on every issue, right, including a lot of issues that weren't even covered under NAFTA. Now we're going to have a NAFTA or a North American environmental bureaucracy, a North American labor standards bureaucracy, which will be subject to the International Labor Organization, the UN's kind of globalist regime to run labor, right, basically to push the big union agenda on all of North America, not just the United States and Mexico, but also up into Canada. And we have this kangaroo court, right? This investor settlement dispute mechanism, they call it, and this is going to allow private companies or governments or Mexican government-controlled companies like Pemex, which owns all the oil and has basically an oil monopoly, to sue our state governments, to sue our federal government, and overturn policies that we pass ourselves. And for people who think, well, that's just a hypothetical threat. This happens now on a constant basis. Just a couple of years ago, the World Trade Organization overturned our country of origin labeling laws on meat. So we're not allowed to know now if our meat is coming in from China or Vietnam or Mexico or whatever the case may be, because the World Trade Organization said so, and our Congress apparently grovels before the almighty globalists at these organizations. So in pretty much every respect, Gary, this is way worse. It was negotiated by Obama holdovers and the U.S. Trade Representative, Robert Lighthizer, who's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. So, unfortunately, as much as I would like to say something nice about it, there's just nothing nice to say about it. It's a terrible deal, and it's going to surrender even more of our sovereignty.
I'm afraid we're going to have to get back into this next week because we're just about out of time. It's amazing how fast the 3 hours goes here. But, yeah, the USMCA is just an advancement of the original NAFTA document, which is an advancement of the North American community, the North American Union.
I think it solidifies it.
The new American Soviet, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we're dealing with here, as Gorbachev said that about the European Union. And so this is what we have to look forward to. But everybody needs to be aware of it so we can push back against it. And that's why people need to be told about this show. And we need to have more people listening to the show, because I have a feeling that we're the only ones talking about this stuff now, Vicky.
Yeah, well, there's so much of a circus going on at our federal government with Trump and Congress and the Justice Department. It's just a big circus.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly. Well, folks, so spread the word about the broadcast and join us back here next week. Pray for this republic. Do what you can to restore it. And thanks, Vicky. Appreciate all you do.
Thank you, Darren.
And God bless you, folks.
I appreciate you, too.
And we'll talk to you again next week.
Bye-bye.